that he is a master at creating smoke screens. I think he believes that if he and he had some brief stint abroad that is very clouded. You don't even economies that we have observed in many oil-producing countries that have not paid heed to that issue. $70 million of products to the Army, but is claiming $700 million, and the PPP is trying to negotiate some deal. If he had any credibility, he will name the person. He will name the person because we would like to know too, and the country would like to know. But this is how they operate. Now, on the other hand, I have an audit report done by Christopher Ram that showed, and when we look at, that's just one element of it, but showed that with the Army, again with the Army and Gael, we lost over $1 billion in the period when APNU was there. They should have, by now, I don't know why they're waiting. People should have been charged by now for that, because the audit report demonstrated that there was a link between the Minister of Finance at that time, the the staff of Gael and the army and in a corrupt activity to steal nearly $1 billion of fuel in that period. No, that's real. That's real. We have it on audit report. So he doesn't want to talk about name today at the press conference. He said, oh, there is a man, and making out guess. I'm telling you exactly what used to happen. We had to clean that up. We had to clean it up. So he wants to save $200 billion from cleaning up corruption. That's all the oil money that came into this year's budget, $1 billion. That was 200 billion Guyana dollars. He is saying all of that goes to corruption in people's pocket, and he will save that, and that will finance all of the things that he's talking about, he's promising. We've heard this before. If they couldn't find it, $1 billion then in corruption, they're going to find 200 billion now, and why not expose the $200 billion of corruption where they're taking place? So, Mr. Norton, they then said that Robert Prasad said that we need 100,000 people, and it's a signal of the incompetence of the PPP. Now, clearly, Mr. Norton doesn't read. And that's the problem when you have an opposition leader who is busy getting his people to sign blank checks and emptying the coffers of the PNC. I have it on good sources that the PNC coffers had, when Norton assumed office, over $100 million. And he couldn't find $2.4 million now to hold a general council meeting. And we're guessing, are we guessing why? Because if you have your treasurer signing blank checks and leaving them with you, and then you don't have to account for the expenditure, then of course you're going to run down the funds. And he's talking about corruption, and he's talking about cleaning up government resources. And then I want to take you a wager. They have a fundraiser abroad, and not a cent will come back from that fundraiser to the party coffers. I want to take you a wager that once the fundraiser is done, we know the way they operate. And so, let me refer Norton to a report that was done by IOM, the International Organization for Migration, in 2021. This is what it says in, I think, the 5th or 6th paragraph. If Guyana were to harness all of its unemployed, underemployed, and discouraged workers, the potential supply of labor would be only 63,500 in the medium term. It is estimated that Guyana will need approximately 160,000 workers. It can be concluded that there will be need for at minimum 100,000 workers in Guyana to realize its full growth potential. What Robert Prasad was quoting from was the IOM report. Now, the IOM has done some good work on manpower survey, but we don't agree with everything. We believe that we can increase the supply of domestic labor by bringing in more people by more than 63,500. That is why we're working on special projects to get more women. We think if we can get more women and more rural women, maybe hinterland women, and some urban women by providing daycare for their kids, then we could add probably just in female labor participation, maybe 100,000 of our people to the labor force. And that is why we've been saying that we are not moving at a full pace to bring in labor. Because if we were to take this report, we should allow 100,000 people to come here. But we're not doing that. We're very judicious because we're saying, first of all, our people must be employed. We're trying to bring more people into the labor force through training programs. We have an aggressive training program in the Ministry of Labor. We have about 17,000 people on scholarships now through the GOAL program. There are lots of these activities going on to bring our own people into the labor force. And more Guyanese are working now. So he made a big issue about this at the press conference because he thinks that he's peddling that we are saying that we need to bring in 100,000 people. It was an IOM report, but of course, he didn't listen to our plans for the various sectors. So he goes on to speak, and Elson Lowe, this is what he said. It is bizarre that the government is talking about importing labor and at the same time expanding the part-time job program. What is bizarre about that? You can do both simultaneously. You can expand the part-time job program to bring your people into employment and still import some labor, of course, skilled labor. You are the GRA itself saying that they don't have that question has come up, I think the last press conference when I was there, about the GRA say, we don't have the skills, and we said, fine, if we don't have the skills, but to allow you to do a good job monitoring Exxon's expenditure, etc., then we'd have to bring in the skills. What is bizarre about that? But again, you see this, this whole issue. And then Norton about borrowing. That the PPP is not borrowing to put into people. So of course we're not borrowing to give a handout to eat. That would be for Norton to do. And PNC did that, and that is why when we assumed office, we're using 100% of revenue to service debt, and that is why we lost nearly 2 decades of development in this country. That is why we are close, we are competing with Haiti to be the lowest economy in per capita GDP terms in this hemisphere. We're competing with Haiti when we did that. We had one of the highest debt, in fact, the highest debt to GDP ratio in the world. Today, it's one of the lowest in the world. But that is the same philosophy, not borrowing to put into people. For him, he has a different concept to probably eat. Borrowing to put into people, for us, means something else. We're borrowing, yes, for the hospitals. But we believe that's going into people too. We're borrowing to build the 12 hospitals because when our people can have free, high-quality health care, then that is keeping them safe and healthy. That's our people benefiting from that. So when we're borrowing to build, to do housing, to put in the infrastructure for housing or to build low-income housing, it's borrowing for our people too, because it helps to house them better, or for our schools, etc. So we have a very different issue. I'm going to come back to Norton mischaracterizing on the approval for green lighting. I see something about green lighting Exxon projects in the light of shortages. And he said, I would not go down that road at all. I listened to Jagdeo, and he wants to pull all the oil out. I don't want to pull all the oil out. What I'm saying is that the depletion policy of the government is to get as much of these resources out of the ground as quickly as possible, given the net zero scenario globally, where there would be a narrow window for using fossil fuel, and converting these into either fixed assets in terms of infrastructure that would capitalize future or incentivize future growth, or convert them into financial assets that can be saved for the long-term development of the country. That is what we are saying. It's clear. And not pull all the oil out of the ground just like that. So, Norton, this is their press conference. They are trying to paint a picture as though people are not benefiting from their oil resources, and that I say it's limited. It is limited, as I said before, $1 billion in this year's budget, and since we started producing oil, we just probably brought into the budget about $1.65 billion. For the first year, last year was 650 million. This year, it's $1 billion. Now, I had to show the last time I was there about some people who are benefiting from these, some groups of people. And today, I just want to tell you where this money is going. So this year budget, we have $200 billion coming into the budget. You have $37 billion increase that has to be funded over 2019 for public service employment, that is wages and salaries growth in the public sector. So our public servants are now in 2023 getting $37 billion more annually, given this year. Next year they would get more because you have a salary increase. This year, $37 billion more than they were getting when APNU left office. $37 billion, the last budget, 2019 budget. And that's nearly 30,000 people. The children, the school children, they're getting $8.4 billion more, and that's 200,000 of them. So that's 230,000. The 74,000 pensioners are getting $14.5 billion more than when APNU left office. The 15,000 or so workers, part-time workers, are getting 10,000. They're getting $10 billion more. The joint services getting $1.4 billion more, and that's another 10,000 persons. So we are talking about 330,000 people. If you add the pensioners, the children, the public servants, the joint services, etc., and the part-time jobs, 330,000 Guyanese who are benefiting from about $70 billion more, $70 billion more. Let's add to that now. Remember, we have $200 billion coming in. That's 70. So if we add the $5 billion to that we now are set aside for cost of living increase, which we haven't spent as yet, that takes you to about $75 billion. To actually $76 billion, because there's 71.5 with those 5 components, 76.5. We now have $50 billion in this year to develop housing. Now, we promised 50,000 house lots. So we're producing those house lots for people, Guyanese, $50 billion this year. So if you add that, that takes you to $126 billion. Water this year, $16 billion. So we're at $142 billion. When we look at the growth in the health budget, it's grown from that period, the last budget APNU did, to now in the health sector, $33 billion more. So I'm at education. I haven't put in roads or nothing else. Education and a number of other areas. I can go, and I'm going to expand this list every week. But in those areas alone, in just the categories I mentioned, in housing, water, and education, and health care, that's $175 billion more than when APNU presented their last budget. And remember, we brought in $200 billion from the oil and gas sector. He's saying, we haven't spoken a cent about highways or the new hospitals or anything else yet, or buying drugs for or the police. Police, huge expenditure there. We haven't spoken about security or anything. And that's already $175 billion that goes directly to social welfare. To social welfare. Everything that I mentioned here goes to social welfare. Water, housing, health, and those other categories that I mentioned, where people get direct transfers to them. I haven't even mentioned about the sugar industry supporting it, or the farmers or the fishermen, the help that they got. So how come ordinary people are not getting this money back? It's how much money you have, you bring in. It's being divided up to ensure two things happen: that we build the infrastructure of the future, whilst at the same time we address the social needs of our people. And this is a carefully calibrated balance. It's a carefully, but for them now, there's no problem with borrowing to eat, basically. That's what he wants us to do. Borrow to eat, and don't worry about Dutch disease, and don't worry about inflation, because the same person who talking about cost of living too high says, don't worry today at their press conference, the three of them. Don't worry about inflation. Inflation is a mythical concept. You don't need to deal with that. And every day they're talking, cost of living increasing. Yes, so but don't worry, just borrow, spend, do whatever it takes to give more cash. And that is why I saw a feeble, really pathetic attempt by Elson Lowe to cost some of their initiatives. It's really infantile. Infantile. I would be ashamed to even make such a document see the light of day. I'd be ashamed to do that. But as I said before, very ignorant. So they talk with great sense of assurance in their ignorance. In their ignorance. It's very hard to get past ignorant people like Glenn Lyle when he bites into a concept. No matter what you say, you can bring all the technical experts, put all the logical issues before them. But they're very assured in their ignorance. And so this is what has happened. We had another display of that at the press conference today. People who have not done anything. In the parliament, they have the Eurate Finance too. Eurate Finance and I don't have a problem with people who just finish school and stuff like that, but it's not child's play running an economy. And it takes years and years to understand the nuances. Now, I'm all for young people to get the experience and training and stuff. But really, you can talk a heap of nonsense if you've never been in a table or in a room where serious policy decisions have to be made. You can talk a heap of nonsense, and it sounds good, and it sounds attractive. People hear, you're getting more money. Forget all this inflation. Just give us more money. And then they destroy the whole economy and everything along with it. Now, over the last week I did not have a press conference. So I've seen they have had a lot of debates on the Coffee 250 activity. And it's very interesting to analyze. It's not unpredictable. So as I said before, there is a group of people who are dedicated to doing a couple of things. Their only job is to ensure that Afro-Guyanese feel dissatisfied, that somehow they're not making progress, or they're not making progress as quickly as they should because the PPP discriminates against them or has policies that harm them accumulating wealth. And this is called, the Kool-Aid game. So it's a very potent political tool, because if you keep saying that to people over and over and over again, every time people encounter a problem at the bank, they would say, oh, this must be because of discrimination. They encounter a problem at housing, never mind, you have everyone encountering the same problem. People of every race encountering the same problem, but they feel that they were singled out for special treatment in a discriminatory manner, because it builds a mindset. And we are trying to break that narrative by facts and figure, and urging people to do that. That is our struggle in the PPP. So, but it keeps, they can't move away from it. So they will have various manifestations of this. And so Nigel Hughes, who's been no friend of the PPP, he has joined the gang, but in a more sophisticated manner, in a manner that seems national and balanced, but the same medicine and the same purpose. That is, you're being discriminated against because you're black, and therefore we have to find another mechanism, and we're ensuring that you get wealthy. And we are in APNU, are the only ones who can do that. The PPP will not do that. That is their narrative. But if you examine, let's examine a number of facts on these issues. So first of all, there is this position by Mr. Hughes that political decision-making should be done by supermajorities to force consensus. Now, in the article, Mr. Hughes said that, I think he was responding to what I said before, that we have to have a period of building trust between the two parties for us to learn to work together for a common purpose, and it must be based on a number of principles. And the two core principles was respect for democracy, free and fair elections, and to move away from racism. That is what we said are preconditions for any engagement with APNU, but there has to be a period of building trust. And I said this as president. We did a paper along that, a white paper, and we issued it, and we had debates about it. And why was that so? The reason we had to do that is in the constitutional reform. We've had numerous engagements with APNU in building trust. At one time in the city council in Georgetown, we agreed that we would try to rotate the chairmanship, the mayorship. So they had, I think it was Randolph Jordan or some, yeah, I think he was mayor. In the first, they said they will take the first turn. When it was the PVP turn to have Philomena Sahai Shuri there, they refused to have her take over. Two, we've had several engagements with APNU historically, and it has always been bad faith. Three, at the constitutional level, we said, hold on a minute. If we cannot reach consensus at the level of the executive, why don't we build in the parliamentary system is moving away from the Westminster model, an arrangement where at each level it will force some side of some opportunity for the sides to work together. And we did that in the constitutional reform. Right? The Parliamentary Management Committee was basically run by the executive. We replaced it with five from both sides, chaired by the Speaker, so that both parties had to collaborate in running the agenda of Parliament. In every one, we established the 4 sectoral committees, rotating them, the 5 constitutional commissions, the procurement commission, reduced the powers of the president. The service commissions, the 4 service commissions had a greater parliamentary input, all to force consensus. On the Chief Justice, the appointment of the Chief Justice and the Chancellor, we said to force consensus that these 2 top positions should have security of tenure, that the leader of the opposition must agree. And what happened? On that one, I'm not going to go through all the other issues. You've seen the experience at the other committee levels. But on that one, since we passed that amendment, we've never had a chancellor and a chief justice that had been appointed fully, only acting. And I think it's about nearly 20 years, over 20 years. An amendment to force, so it's like a supermajority now, a veto to force consensus, and it never worked. Never ever worked, and that is at the judicial level. Much less in what they want is a supermajority in Parliament to run the executive. To run the executive. Now, the 3 branches of government have separate functions. So first of all, if you go to the Parliament, the executive, if it brings in, and why I was suggesting building trust, just imagine people talk about power sharing, and the 2 sides sitting at the cabinet, and they can't reach agreement on anything. You almost become like there's a country next to ours that have coalition governments all the time. And they never could reach decisions on every project is negotiated. You can't be effective. People elect you to get jobs for them, better health care, better education, security, etc. You have a situation where you can't reach consensus and you can't make a decision because of some supermajority. You need to make a decision. Gridlock. You might as well fold up the government. But that is, you notice when they're in power, they never call for supermajorities to do anything. But when they're out of office, Nigel Hughes and the others talk about supermajority. But Nigel Hughes has run a law office. He's never run government agencies too. And again, He could talk whatever he wishes out there. He could muse a lot. A lot of people have ideas. But at every day, if you don't get the salaries paid, or people roads fixed, or keep the lights on, you can debate a lot about super majorities, etc. Then they're dissatisfied. And I suspect that the reason they want super majority is veto power. Super majorities give veto power to the opposition. You don't have to win government. You have a veto power like they had with the Chancellor and Chief Justice. So you tell me which country in the world the opposition has a veto power over the government. Which country in the world? So they want to make it look like Guyana is the worst country in terms of discrimination in the world. I can tell you, like in terms of Guyana, if you look at every branch of government, they reflect the ethnic composition of our country. When you look at benefits, and we'll talk about benefits in a moment, they reflect equity, particularly when PPP has been in office. And so he's proposing a model, the same person who thought that 34 is the majority of 65. That was a super majority. That's what he wants now. So then a no confidence motion would have failed, and you wouldn't have had to follow the Constitution. Luckily, we had the CCJ. This is a recipe for gridlock. It has nothing to do with Afro-Guyanese interests. It has everything to do with investing power and veto power in the hands of a few who claim they represent Afro-Guyanese, but when they're in office, we see a very different situation. So now let's talk, so that's one issue, and that the Constitution must be used to ensure Afro-Guyanese benefit from wealth. Now, where in the world does a Constitution do that? Our Constitution operates on the basis that you can't discriminate. You can't discriminate. So this is all flowery language to say to Afro-Guyanese, you're not getting your share, and therefore we are representing you, and we want a constitutional amendment. So let us look at what they've been saying. So some of the facts. He wants an amendment to the Constitution to force the government to have a breakdown of data to show ethnic deprivations. We can show you the composition, the data on the composition of the public service. If we show you the data on the composition, those who get house lots, etc., then you will see where the resources go. But we will come to that in a moment. I want to, he mentioned this issue about water treatment plants to feed into this narrative that Afro-Guyanese are not getting the support from the PPP government. So he uses saying no Afro-Guyanese got a water treatment plant. Now, yesterday afternoon, I called GWI and I said, how many new water treatment plants? Because we have an aggressive program for treated water along the coast and all the villages, not Indo-Guyanese villages, treated water and hinterland water. So how many new water treatment plants are we building? So there's 7 of them. On the naming, so on the naming, the bids, we're talking about bids now. I think there are about 1 Guyanese company that put in a bid of 7 bidders. Yes. no, this is for Parika. Parika, one Guyanese company that put in a bid, one from Trinidad, in fact, two from Trinidad, one from China, one from Japan, one from Bangladesh, and the Guyanese company came in with a company from India and one from Mexico. The Japanese company won the bid. So on the naming, and it's the same pattern, or maybe one Guyanese company. All 7, I'm going to share this data with you. Every one of the 7 new water treatment plants all went to international companies. Not a single Guyanese company succeeded, even the one that bid with a company from India, which is not. They went to the companies from Mexico, Bangladesh, and Japan. These are new water treatment plants. So not Afro-Guyanese nor Indo-Guyanese, nor no Guyanese got it, because these are major new projects. Now, I can tell you how many people, I don't want to go down the list, but thousands of new people. 17,000 one case, that's under naming, 6,600 at Parika, 25,000 at Parfair Harmony, 14,000 at Wales. Caledonia, which is from Susdyke to Craig, would be 14,000 new beneficiaries. Cummins Lodge, which will cover North and South Romvelt, is another, and parts of Sophia, 17,000. Bachelor's Adventure would cover Nabaklis, Colditch, Haslington, and more. Fowles, Paradise, Adventure, Beirut, Melanie, 36,000 people will benefit from these. These are the number of beneficiaries, Guyanese beneficiaries, but not a single went to any Guyanese company of the 7. But he said that no Afro-Guyanese got it, no Guyanese got it. So that's one. Now, there are 12 of them that are being rehabilitated. So 7 new ones and 12 are being rehabilitated. So they're at Eccles, Grove, Covent Garden, Port Drouin, Fellowship, Virgin Eugene, Better Hope, Monrepo, Friendship, New Amsterdam, Portmorant, Cotton Tree. And they cover large areas. But these are existing ones that are being rehabilitated. So on these, in all of these 12 bids, we have had 2 of them, in 2 cases, one company, Courtney Ben General Construction Services, that tendered, that's Afro-Guyanese, and in one case, a quality deliverer, or Arbery, David from New Amsterdam. 2, we've had in all 12, only 3 bids that came from Afro-Guyanese. 2 bids that for 2 different lots from one company and 1 bid. When you look at the one for New Amsterdam, etc., the bid was, and you get the numbers, was like 1/7 of the price of the engineer's estimate. So I think they were disqualified right away. Now the one with Courtney Ben, I need to say something. So if you talk to this Courtney Ben General Construction Services, you will find out from Courtney Ben General Construction Services that they were tendering and doing well in GWI until 2015. And they said, after 2015, this is a black contractor complaining. Imagine all of the bids, only 2 companies bid, 2 Afro-Guyanese companies. And the one that bid twice said, after APNU came into office, I stopped getting work at GWI. Stopped getting work totally at GWI. That's the same Courtney Ben Construction Services. That contractor is now working, building the wharf, the police wharf. It's working on a government contract now. But under APNU, He said he practically went bankrupt. He used to tender all years and work for GWI? He did. This is how much they love Afro-Guyanese. Now, Courtney Ben himself, just to tell you how much love they have, a lot of people got land under the BK got 100 acres at Providence by the stadium. A number of developers got land. APNU did not take away the 100 acres from BK when they were in office. But guess who they took away the land from? The 50 acres that Courtney Ben had at New Providence, he lost it. They took it away from him, the 50 acres. A black, one of the few black persons, maybe there were 3 or 4 black persons who got under that. They took it away from him, the black person, and then he didn't even get back his money that he paid. Only when the PPP came into office that we gave him back his money that he paid for the land. They took away his 50 acres. That's how much they love Afro-Guyanese. You ask how many Afro-Guyanese went bankrupt in that period. How many Indian businessmen, big ones who were carrying bribes to the offices of the ministers, were getting contracts. And they can tell you their experience because they were forced to, many of them. But they were getting the contract, they were buying it. That is the experience. So when Nigel use and APNU talk about love for Afro-Guyanese, more black companies went bankrupt in the 5 years of APNU than any period in our history. Well, there were none practically in the period up to 1992 because the whole country was in shambles. So what experience, what have they done for Afro-Guyanese? They took away the children grant, so all the black children were deprived too. They took that away. They took away the water for the pensioner. All the Afro-Guyanese were deprived. In Linden, they gave land to only a couple of people. Today, more people are getting land in Linden. We have more people employed in Region 10 and Linden now under the PPP, Afro-Guyanese, than under APNU that left office recently. How is this love reflecting itself? And they want equal balance. More Afro-Guyanese have scholarships now, maybe 6,000, 7,000 of the 17,000, more than that maybe, because the last count was about that. 17,000. That's six, maybe 7,000. I'm being conservative here. Have scholarships that didn't have when they were there. Thousands more got house lots under this government that they couldn't get when they were in office. And they're the ones championing the cause of Afro-Guyanese. Sometimes I think if we were not there, they would just take that community for granted. And everybody has benefited, not only Afro-Guyanese, but Amerindians have benefited too. And Indo-Guyanese, we work in all the communities to make sure that they get help, every community, not just one community. So what is this thing about your love for Afro-Guyanese? This is what they want to keep people dissatisfied. You're not getting enough. So never mind, I got nothing under them, but I'm not getting enough under the PP. I'm only getting a house lot here, but another man getting something else. So you keep people dissatisfied, but they will never do anything. And this is the fallacy of all of this. Every time a Nigel Hughes and the others talk, they will go through that. They can't deal with the fact that more businesses, etc. Now, you have more Afro-Guyanese contractors, not a few big ones, many small ones, because the few big ones, even a couple of them who started off under APNU. One man told me he started off, and before he reached home, they were calling him for money. Practically bankrupt him. Practically bankrupt him. You check who had to pay homage and which minister's office they had to go to, etc. So when I hear this Nigel Lewis talk about constitutional reform for equity, this is pure nonsense, utter nonsense, because we're in the world where the Constitution tells you to do that. It's people to ensure equity. In fact, if you look at every aspect of the allocation of oil and gas money, I just pointed out to you some sectors where nearly $170 million would be spent. And those are in health, that all of our people will benefit from, housing, and the children, the pensioners, etc. That goes across the board to all of our people, regardless of your race. That is how it goes. So they can just go wrong. I saw Rick Ford Burke. It's the same kind of trend. Now, his organization hosting an activity in Washington to talk about discrimination in Guyana. Now, the first thing they should do is to catch him and lock him up, because he is that organization that he has should be registered under FARA. He is lobbying in the US, and it's illegal to lobby the way he is doing it unless you're registered as a foreign agent. So that's what they should do, and maybe someone needs to complain to the Justice Department and other places that he is doing that. He's collecting money for that purpose, and I think he is ripping people off. He creates this organization. He has to generate activities and to have profile, and then he raises money to do this. So that's what he's been doing. And then we know that he's a criminal. He tried to extort businessmen for money here. So anybody who associates with him, they're associating with a criminal type, a criminal in Washington. And we will make this point, and I don't care which congressman or anybody else who wants to be part of a criminal network, because that is what he has. I don't care about that. Because at the end of the day, the people of this country matter, and particularly those who live here. They matter. So we will robustly take that on, and we'll point out all of this. In fact, he'll get some robust engagements there, and we'll embarrass those who will be part of these activities, because we point out there are links to a criminal who is living off of the US and probably living illegally off of the proceeds in that country. So I'm going to share with you some of this information. And another thing is that they use, the same Nigel used, he talked about water treatment plant. No Afro-Guyanese person has an oil block. Well, a few maybe have gotten Indo-Guyanese from the past, a long past, but nobody, not Indo-Guyanese, Afro-Guyanese will get a new block, because you have to bid now. Now, if they bid and they provide the signing bonus and everything else, because people like to flip these blocks, then they will get it. But this is not like Indo-Guyanese getting it at the expense of Afro-Guyanese. And those who got blocks, many of them now are thinking about getting, because they've spent large sums of money in Kanji and Kaishore especially, and they have not gotten commercial oil. So they're out of pocket now, seriously out of pocket on the exploration. They would only be able to recoup all of the costs for the failed exploration if they move to a project, because without a project, they have no opportunity to do that. So again, this is the kind of mood. It's keeping people dissatisfied. And that is why we need to present facts to break all of this fallacy. Maybe I should end there because I've been going on for a while. And next week when I go to Freedom House, I have some really serious things to talk about, some individuals. Yes, but I don't want to contaminate the government's press conference by dealing with all of that today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. Kian Wilbur, Kaiser News. Just a few questions. Can you explain the thinking behind the government's interest in two refineries? And has Trinidad or any other nation expressed an interest in similar talks? That's the first question. Secondly, can you provide us with an update on the sale of the Marriott Hotel? There are some rumors going around that that's already closed up. If you can just confirm that. Thirdly, CGX has delayed the Berbice Deepwater port for a third time. Is government concerned about the company's ability to deliver on this project? Fourthly, the opposition...
So let me start writing now, Kiana. One, sale of Marriott. Two...
The first one was on the thinking behind...
Thinking, two refinery.
Yes, and if any other nation
okay.
has expressed an interest. The second is for an update from the sale of the Marriott Hotel.
Yes.
The third is CGX and the delay for the Deepwater port, if government is concerned about its ability to deliver.
Okay.
With there being a third delay. And the fourth, the political opposition did table a number of amendments.
Can people hear you? Because one of the complaints I've had is that the questions are not heard. So it looks like a monologue that I have all the time, and I'm responding to questions, actually.
You want me to go to the bathroom and repeat?
Yeah, or...
Just rehash the questions.
Okay.
Just rehash our questions.
All right, maybe I can, yes.
We got the microphones there.
The fourth, the opposition will table a number of amendments, one of them being the need...
I know it might be better if we get her to... You have a microphone here, or... All right, I'll do this press conference, but the next one, please arrange a microphone so that the reporters can get that. And then people will hear their questions too. Yeah.
Sure. The fourth question is sort of two parts. The opposition tabled a number of amendments on the, thank you, the political opposition, well, now that I have the mic, do I start again?
Yes, go ahead, yeah.
Okay. So I have a few questions for you, Kian Wilbur from Kaiser News. Can you explain the rationale behind two refineries, which the government is now in the public domain, and if any other nation has expressed an interest for similar talks? Can you provide an update on the sale of the Marriott Hotel? Thirdly, with CGX delaying the Deepwater port for a third time, is government concerned about its ability to deliver on this project? Fourthly, and this is two parts, the political opposition tabled a number of amendments on the Petroleum Activities Bill, one being to bring the blocks that are negotiated through one-on-one sessions under parliamentary scrutiny. With what you explained earlier about the vetoing power, did this underline or inform the government's rejection of such proposals? And there has been some concern about the ministerial powers awarded to the minister. Can you provide some clarity on who will serve as the check and balance against the abuse of the powers granted to that official?
So, yeah. This is back on? Okay, all right. So now I can come back on, yes. So we still are exploring one refinery, but we've had several interests. So we went out for requests for proposal. We have several of those. The was a first round evaluation. We're waiting for more information. But even as we do that, a number of other countries are sending in proposals to us, etc. At the end of the day, if it goes forward, it has to be on conditions that are good for our country. And they have to meet all the financial and technical requirements. But we don't have the capacity for 2 refineries now. There shall be, if that project goes forward, the 1 refinery. Simultaneously, we are looking at storage, strategic reserves. So one of the reasons we wanted a refinery was to ensure national energy security. And we're exploring what it would take to toll some of our crude and what fee we may have to pay for tolling the crude and then bringing back the refined products and storing them, like in the US they have strategic reserves. That might, from some initial numbers, and I don't have and preliminary numbers, it could not only guarantee national energy security, but also we could have a significantly cheaper cost of energy, that is the products being sold here into the market, because you cut out, you know, there's a big margin between the crude price and the refined products price. So that is being explored too at the same time. Although you didn't ask about it, we just come up with we're moving ahead on the gas strategy, and because that is a promise once we get past the legislation and could actualize the bid round, we will move to the gas strategy. We may very well explore the market. That is for the bigger project, gas monetizing the other gas reserves that we have, not for the Wales power plant, and seeing what interest there is in the market. Because if we await maybe just Exxon moving at its own pace, then it may take, this might not be a priority project for them. And for us, monetizing the gas reserves, probably building a petrochemical industry, maybe LNG, that could yield significant value to Guyana. So we started now activating that, and we've started looking. If you were there at the meeting, the local content activity that Guyana had, I said to them that once we've completed the architectural work, which is about complete now, then we will move to data, strengthening data collection and also verification work with Exxon and its production. And so we're turning our attention to those issues also at their level. So that's one issue. The second issue is CJX and the deepwater port. Now, it was never a deepwater port. Deepwater port would be a port that can bring in the massive vessels. In the Berbice River, that location, it's hard to do a deepwater port. So this was more when about, I don't know, 15 years ago, when they got the land there. This was to allow them to build a facility from which they would support the exploration activities. Now, we've had discussions with them because even if it is a port to support oil activities offshore, because we expect a lot more oil-related exploration once we get through the bid round. You know, assuming we get 14 bids or even six of the 14 taking up the blocks, then you'd have an acceleration in exploration activities. So that would mean more people to work and more porting and docking facilities and drilling vessels and all of that. So they can probably use that there. So that is what we are pushing them to do. Now, that is unrelated to the other things that we discuss about relinquishing some blocks and making a decision on whether they move to production in the remaining, for the areas where they said they found oil. So it was never intended as a deep water facility. A deep water facility would mean that you can bring in like the Panamax vessels and stuff, those massive vessels. In the area where they are in Berbice, with the dredging costs alone to get into that will be huge. So a deep water port too will cost, I think this, they're estimated at $30-something million. A deep water facility of the nature may cost upwards of $1 billion that we're talking about. That's the going cost globally with massive docks and everything else and cranes. So that's where we are. On the sale of the Marriott, I know that the negotiations NISIL was doing the negotiations. So you may be right. It's basically to wrap up. You know what the bid they're negotiating with the bidder. So it's just as soon as they can wrap it up, we'd be happy. Earlier, the better. I don't know if they've completed that. I've not followed that. I've moved on to other things. But then that will probably go to the cabinet and then be concluded. But the cabinet has already accepted the highest bid, which is $90 million bid. And yes, so the opposition made a number of suggestions to amend the Petroleum Activities Bill. And I see Patterson is now getting kudos as the anyhow, as a Murray House Fellow. Because this is the same guy who made a mess of the sector that he was in. Same guy who's been dangling stuff all over the place. So it's the double standards. And thirdly, who is charged of corruption? So when it rubs me the wrong way, the first thing, that he moralizes and been charged before the court for several acts of corruption that he performed as minister. And by not a long way exhaustive, we just had to drop some of them and not even move on. So, because he likes to moralize when he talks. And that's why I'm a little vindictive too, because I want to really, he's a low life, and I call him that here. So he's very vindictive talking about it, and people of high moral standing could afford to do that. Not him, not him. So now coming to the amendments. So we predicted, imagine we didn't get so much publicity from the newspapers, Kaichor and Stabrook, for passing a law and updating it, modernizing it, expanding it, that was there since 1986. The government, they should say, this is a progressive government that made a promise, did it, expanded it, went to public consultations on it, and passed it. Patterson did some half-baked amendments, and then he gets all the publicity as though he's the conscience of the oil and gas industry. It's the same people who made a mess of it. Trotman now suddenly becomes the star. He promoting renegotiation. And he was the biggest villain, the biggest criminal in signing the agreement. So it is this warp, it's this warp portrayal that really rubs me the wrong way. It's a warp. Now, Patterson came up there. We predicted the night before they sprung the amendment. He had all the time before to submit these amendments. So they had the public consultation. He wants to do it in Parliament. It goes the same way. They want to manage the oil and gas sector from the Parliament. That is what they want to do. Manage the oil and gas sector from the Parliament. And you know what will come out of it. The same people who were defending Exxon and defending that contract. Ramjatan said the contract is the second best thing since independence. Second best thing since independence. Now for the public show, they want a grandstand. They're the conscience of this country. These people, Exxon walk all over them. All over them, Exxon and the others. They can't do that with the PPP and with us. We're clear about what we want. If we defend something, we defend it because our interests coincide and it's good for the country. Not because it's good for the Exxon or we're in somebody's pocket. I saw Glenn Lal paid some man to do a documentary on Guyana and cussing up the reporters. All of you are bought out by Exxon, the judiciary bought out by Exxon, and everybody. So we do things because of that. So you think we're going to hand over the management to the oil and gas sector to the Parliament, where the grandstanding takes place? They would just shut it down for vindictive purposes, because they're not happy when people get jobs. They're not happy that the part-time workers are making money now. They're not happy for anybody. They just want to see failures. They fail in government and to do anything on the architecture. And you think we're going to hand it over and give them veto power, almost? Now, and there was one point you made, oversight. Oversight. Now, this is why that a lot of the authority now, when Trotman ran off on his own and signed things, the minister has to act, one, in accordance with the law. If he acts outside of the law, and the law is clear about how he exercises his power, but he has to do so in most cases where it matters, with the approval of the cabinet. So he cannot, unlike the old legislation, he cannot do it on his own. It means a collective scrutiny of the documents and the exercise of his power. We can't vest that in Patterson or Norton. We can't vest that in them. We vested it in a larger group that has collective responsibility to the people of this country. We made it clear. A lot of the amendments had to do with the Petroleum Commission. We said there shall be a Petroleum Commission at the appropriate time, and when that comes into being, that the powers that have to be migrated from the minister to the commission or from the cabinet to the commission shall be done at that point in time. And a lot of their things were about the commission. So that is why. But what rubs me is these half-baked amendments and some people getting all, excited about these in the newspapers and stuff like that. And I look at it and say, is this the nonsense that goes? They missed the core thing. We passed a new law. Now we have a modern framework for managing the oil and gas sector. The law is comparable to laws around the world, modern laws. And in most countries, the authority rests with the minister. With the minister in most countries. It's a comparable law that is modern, not 1986 law. We should be celebrated for that. And we should, but we're not looking for a pat on the back, but just to take this sloppy piece of work that he did and elevate it to sometime like this is a seminal piece of work that will change the industry. It's really the same thing. And now the new PSA is in effect now. So he didn't find a problem that he wanted to do a 2% agreement that they were defended, 2% royalty. But he wants now, we have increased it to 10%. So he wants to put in for the public show between 10 and 15%. No simulation, nothing, to look at if we remain competitive. If we move it to 15%, you could effectively shut down all the exploration money and, in fact, future oil flows to Guyana. If you move it from 10 to 15, but he wants to put that in the legislation to make it look that they have bigger cojones than others. But they were wimps with Exxon. Total wimps. Or total wimps with Exxon. They just, and now that's all grandstanding that takes place in the parliament. It's sickening to see the grandstanding. And the newspapers feed into that grandstanding. When we came up with that, we explained how we came up with the fiscal terms. We took time to explain. They didn't even make a comment. When we put it out to public consultation, we said we did it in an iterative way. We said, what if we increase the royalty from 2% to 5% and the taxes to 15%? And we work out, we said, where is the global spectrum of competitiveness? Where do we want to sit on national take on this spectrum? And then we work backwards in an iterative way to come up with a 10% royalty, a 10% corporate tax, 65% maximum for cost recovery, and then small blocks soon, they'll be ring fence effectively. And that yields a significantly higher take for the country, but keeps us competitive globally. I saw some articles in urging Namibia to follow the Guyana model. A lot of, about how we are approaching the industry. This is African countries. We have had a lot of calls now from especially newly producing countries. They want to come and replicate our experience. They want to know how we are moving to bring in place modern pieces of legislation and agreements at the pace at which we're doing and still keep the industry going. We promise to help. I personally promise that they can come here. We've seen a lot of delegations coming in to learn from us. Local content legislation can learn from us. So those are the, no, let me go to another. You had 4, so give someone else, yes.
Good afternoon.
4 to Kaitro News, yes, so.
President Jamal King, now, could you give an update?
Were you one of the journalists in the documentary? That's just an aside. I wanted to flush the yoga, throw you off a bit.
I haven't seen it. Yes,
haven't
could
seen
you
it.
give an update on when the government expects to publish the finalized new model petroleum agreements? And have you gotten any closer to getting the U.S. Exim Bank to approve that loan to support the gas entry project?
So they are working, our embassy in Washington is in daily contact with the Exim Bank, and they feed us reports, the Minister of Finance. And so they're going through all the steps. You know, there are several steps you have to go through. And I think we're on track on the Exim Bank loan. We've been assured this at every level when Secretary Blinken came here, different delegations, that the U.S. sees this as priority too. So we have a technical group of people working on that to make sure that it happens. The model contracts, I think by now, I asked the ministry that we should get the law sent it to by the president and the final contracts for both deep sea and the PSA for the deep water and shallow, sent to all the bidders. And as soon as they were sent off, I don't see a problem why they should be on our website. So let me find out from the ministry where exactly they are, but this is a priority now, given that we have set, I think it's September 10th. I don't know the exact date. I think it's 12th, September 12th, as the deadline for the submission of the bids. So we need to get that out to the bidders. But all the bidders have been familiar with what's going on, so they've probably seen them already.
Okay, we can come back to the loan.
Yes, sure.
Do you have any indication that, what I'm trying to get is, do you see this process right now as just procedural? Do you get the feeling that they will approve the loan?
We've been assured, the president has been in touch. You know, when we're in Washington, the president met the president of Exim Bank, and there have been regular contacts. The president is going to, in September again, to Washington, so I have no doubt that there will be further engagements, but we've been in contact at the highest level. There is nothing that we're told that is adverse in the processing of the loan at this point in time.
APA Corporation, oil company that has stakes in the offshore Suriname, has said that there are some discussions between Guyana and Suriname or something like that to have floating LNG developed, like a joint development. Could you speak to that?
Oh, we always keep an open mind. It's not discussions to finalize anything. We explored various ideas. In the beginning, about 2 years ago, I went to Suriname, and we were even exploring that, whether at that time the president had visited and he asked me to go follow up on some issues when we were talking about this energy corridor. And at that stage, I discovered that they had not made any investment decisions as yet on utilizing their resources. They were still in the stage of proving their reserves. So we even had then about about common infrastructure, joint exploration, joint development, if it makes they make the project more viable. But we're not awaiting anyone moving. We're not going to be constrained by the pace at which another country operates. But along the road, if we have commonality and they move at the same pace, because we don't need to be shy about what we said already about the pace at which we're moving, that if we have commonality, we'll explore with any country, Trinidad, Suriname, anyone.
Okay, finally, you said just now when talking about exploring perhaps refining gas crude, the possibility of having the crude refined somewhere else that brought back for strategic reserves. I'm trying to get an understanding of how you rank the proposals for refining our crude, because I'm looking at the fact that we have a very experienced neighbor, Trinidad, that's right there and already has a refinery. And so when the Dominican Republic announcement was made, it kind of felt out of the blue. And so how do you feel about Trinidad right now?
No, in Trinidad, at one stage, there were some discussions, but if we are doing a refinery, it will be here, because it defeats the purpose of your energy security, and you have the refining done in Trinidad. But if you can get a tolling fee, it could be refined anywhere in the world, but you then store the refined products here, then that's a different concept. So one, if you're doing tolling, then it could be done anywhere else, provided it's cost competitive. If you're doing the refinery, it has to be here, because what if there is a disruption in global supplies or regional supplies for an extended period, then, and the refineries in Trinidad, that doesn't help us. So those are the considerations. Right.
Yeah.
Dr. Jagdeo, a few questions. Firstly, do you think that the present administration is playing into Kaicho's narrative, since the present administration is the one in a past time developed the program for the Marriott and is now presently questioning or answering Kaichou's questions as it relates to Marriott sale? Is this administration into promotion of Kaichou News? Why, at some point in time, this administration does not question Kaichou News' motive? It seems that the PPP administration is in the promotion of Kaichou News.
That's a strange logic. But the last time you raised this issue about advertisement, and I suspect the question that was raised. Now, we can't forget the history, and I hope that the people of this country do not forget history, but we need to move on. And I don't think the question was asked in bad faith. It was just a question to find out where we are on the sale. And I don't think a lot of the reporters have the same obsession with madness and like Adam Harris and Glenn Lal had with about everything we did. So it's not just the Marriott. The Marriott was supposed to be a corrupt project under the PPP. Glenn Lal said that he had evidence about who owned the Marriott. APNU could not find any evidence. They know it's 100% owned by the government, but Glenn Ladd promised to supply the evidence that somebody else owned this Marriott. He never did, but he persisted in that for about 15 years. He had about over 200 articles when I was president about talking about corruption on the Marriott program, that it was all corrupt. I was doing it for friends and all of that, that it would be a white elephant. APNU said the same thing. They were going to convert it into a hospital, that it was a corrupt project. So we can't forget this. So Christopher Ram said the same thing, everybody. And we persisted. Where would we have been without the Marriott today? Because, and secondly, when we went out to tender, first of all, we were told don't sell it. Now it is a gold mine. It moved from a white elephant to a gold mine. That's Glenn Lal saying we're selling out the gold mine because we want our friends to get it. Then when we got a bid for 65 million and one for 55 million, he said we should sell it for the 55 million, not 65, but you recall that. The low of the two price. And then I said, we're not accepting 65, and we were told about Wall Street analysts in editorials in Starbrook and everything saying we'll never get a higher bid price because the price earning ratio was too high, and we ended up with a 90 million bid when we retendered. And so nobody will apologize to the PPP for this, or us, for all the lies that they told and everything else, and all these analysts and everything else. But they've already destroyed reputations over the period by speaking about corruption. It's the same thing that happened with the Hope Canal. It's the same thing with the stadium. Almost every single Berbice Bridge, every single project was supposed to be corrupt. And then they ended up doing this. So I can't blame the reporter today for asking me about the Marriott. because they're interested in finding out whether the sale has been done. But there is that history, and people here forget the history. And you got people like Graham Jatan and the others who will keep repeating it even now. Glenlal on his program, but the Marriott was corrupt. In the face of all of this evidence, otherwise, but he'll still do it. You recall what Glenlal said. He could sell us power at 3 cents per kilowatt hour. We didn't need to do the gas to energy project from solar. I said, bring the proposal at 5 cents per kilowatt hour. He sat right here, and months passed, nothing happened, and then he said he'll do it in weeks. Up to now, about 8 months, 9 months have passed, we don't see anybody coming up with a proposal, but he will keep repeating it. Just recently, I saw a story saying there's no evidence that the gas to energy would result in cheaper power. What evidence do they need? The gas to energy project will generate power at 4 to 5 cents per kilowatt hour. So the evidence can't be in the project. The evidence is in government policy. And the government has already stated in its policy that it will sell at 11 cents per kilowatt hour, which is half of the current price today. How can you find that evidence of that there will be cheaper power in the document? You will see cheaper production costs, but not cheaper selling costs. That's a policy-making position. We could sell it for 50 cents, 12 cents, 11 cents, 18 cents, 9 cents. That's a policy-making, because this government made a commitment to people that we want cheaper power for our manufacturing sector and for our industries and for consumer. That's policy. But big article, no evidence. Citizens tell somebody that there's no evidence it would result in lower power. It's pure nonsense. So, yes, we've had a lot of that. And a daily thing. I go through the headlines in Kaichor News. It's a daily thing. And he gets some unsuspecting Africans and stuff like that. And the people have great goodwill because they speak generally. They don't speak about Guyana. And then he portrays it as they're talking about Guyana. He should interview the people who came from Ghana, the large group of people who came from Ghana, and find out if they're excited about what's happening here. He should find out about that group. And so that's how
Dr. Jagdeo, recently, Keith Rowley, Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, made disparaging comments about Guyana and our the exchange rate in Guyana. And the intention was to belittle us. While Guyanese, yourself and your government, continue to try to facilitate Guyanese as being a part of CARICOM, playing member states, and we are trying to be inclusive and everything else, while Trinidad
we're in opposition a lot and about how cozy they were with APNU. And we found a couple of evidence of that, and we know why. I think some companies gave APNU a lot of funding in that period. There was no protection of Guyanese business in the oil and gas sector. And that is why it was this government that passed the Local Content Act that allowed Guyanese companies now to benefit from rental of vehicles. They were all being done from companies from abroad, particularly Trinidad. Even logistic services, logistics to clear people at the airport, and all of that were done by companies there. So we, without being xenophobic, because Trinidad does have some expertise, and it has some capital, and we welcome businessmen from any country. But they have to work, they have to be respectful of our people and our laws. And there's enough room in the oil and gas sector for them to invest in and not to try to get into the areas that we carved out for our own people, Guyanese. That is in security services and cleaning services and all of those things, landscaping, the rental of vehicles, everything, because large number. I spoke with one person and they have 400 drivers, Guyanese drivers who work for that company, etc., for supply to Exxon and the others. So a lot of people locals are getting work in that area where they would have been very different. So that is how we protect our people without getting xenophobic. I hate this thing when people try to run down our country. Too. I don't want to get into any controversy with Mr. Rowley, because one time I said about we determined to ensure that we don't utilize oil and gas resources the same way that they did, and it got into a big heated controversy in right, thank you. So it got into a controversy there. But every time, sometimes they always use Guyana as an example. And so I saw that, it was sent to me, and it was speaking about local government elections, and then Mr. Rowley said something about, oh, that's like the Guyana dollars, and laugh. Like meaning basically our currency is weak. Japan was the third largest economy in the world. The yen to dollar is over 100 to 1. Doesn't mean Japan's economy is weak. They are over 100 to 1 US dollar. So let them live in this fantasy. And the fact remains is that today, a lot of Trinidadian companies now, because of intense foreign currency shortage in Trinidad, and they have exchange controls, which we don't have, because we have an open market, they have a managed market because of shortages. For months and months, people can't get foreign currency in that country. So we notice a trend here is that people, Trinidadian companies, or some Trinidadian companies, are procuring large quantity of goods for their business in Guyana and in Trinidad, and paying from here, making payments from here to their suppliers. So they're utilizing our foreign currency to make those payments. So I hope Mr. Rowley looks at that too.
Dr. Jagdeo, recently a representative of someone who corrected McDonald, sitting MP, and a representative of the Teachers Association, on a program that she had recently, made or facilitated comments about East Indians in Guyana. How does the PPD administration...
I hope positive comments.
Well, they were not positive comments. They were negative comments.
But I didn't see that yet.
Suggested that East Indians didn't have history. And this is a live video. This is recorded. So East Indians didn't have history. Someone called in on a program and suggested that East Indians did not have history in Guyana, and their actions were one of an illegal background, and in Ms. Coretta McDonald was in agreement with that on a program. Now, Ms. Correa.
Now, I can't comment on something that I have not seen, but I wouldn't be surprised if Coretta McDonald has done this. Amanda Walton did that too, when she said that I can't remember the comment. Well, you don't want to tell me. It is that Indian people are mentally lazy. Mentally lazy.
Vice President, just to make sure we have clarity, I will have it here.
Yeah, well, I know. I heard enough. I don't want to waste my press.
In agreement is Ms. Coretta McDonald. How do you respond? Bear in mind, she sits at the head of an organization that oversees the people who educate our children.
That I had done when I was president, where the union got 100 duty-free vehicles for teachers and all of that. So she's a very duplicitous character, and I get what you're saying, because this union represents people of every race too. Is she saying to the Indo-Guyanese teachers that they're useless, basically? And, you know, but Indo-Guyanese have often been at the brunt of it, and that's not seen as racism. When Amanda Walton just got away with it, saying Indian people are mentally lazy. Can you imagine if somebody else says that? There'd be protests outside their home, etc. So these are people who are jaundiced. They have nothing to offer anyone. And for them, if Afro-Guyanese believe that they represent them, they don't. They represent an elite. That is how Amanda Walton got a plot of land, and 2 family members got land in Linden, but ordinary people didn't get land in the last government. And the same thing happened to all of them. Their days are dated. I think this sort of thing, but this racism, they're making one last stand, and we have to fight it all the time. Somebody should report her to the ERC. Someone should report her to the ERC. And yeah.
Per Campbell Newsroom. Can you say if the government has received any early complaints of mismanagement of the carbon credit funds at the village level, and if yes, how is the government addressing that? And do you have any update for the nation as it relates to independent monitoring of the oil outputs?
All right, so on that one, we have heard there are some disagreements in some of the villages. So again, you don't have 100% consensus as to what to utilize the money for. So that's why we said once it's done at a village council meeting, and then you have everyone agreeing to the utilization, we will live with that. And there's some parameters. But of course, if others don't get their way at the village meeting, then they come and complain too. So, but we don't want to be caught up in that too, because it's done in a democratic way. And so the moment you start doing that, you may end up trying to reverse something that the majority wanted, but a few are dissatisfied with. So we have to be extremely cautious. Where we are a bit concerned is that when I was in Region 9, some of the Tushau said to me, in fact, I thought the ministry had helped him. And they bought 2 vehicles, and the vehicles didn't work. So I thought the ministry had gone through and helped them, because normally we'd ensure that the car dealers don't shoot people on the reconditioned vehicles. So then I asked the PS to make sure that we contact the car dealer and we go back, and because if they don't fix it, then we'll have major issues here. They wouldn't be able to supply the government anymore. So that sort of thing sometimes, when they do their own procurement, like they get advice, but like the equipment wasn't working. So we need to constantly watch all of these things. Some villages, they're saying they want the money individually, others want it for community project, but that's up to the prerogative of the village. So it's not going to be an easy process, just like here on the coast too. But people have different views. On what was the second?
Independent monitoring.
Oh, yes. So this is what I said at the activity at Ghana at Thursday. I pointed out, as I did here at the press conference, that once we complete the core reform in the sector, a new law, new PSA, new act, Local Content Act, revised Natural Resources Fund. We're about there now. The next phase is the gas development, gas strategy, and then data, improving data, and verification of production. So that's where we are going in the next wave of reforms. Yes, Dennis.
Mike Dennis.
Mike, yes.
Mr. Chairman, sir, you referred earlier about the admins taking advantage of the foreign exchange market here with buying goods. Could you say whether that is the reason for, or part of the reason for the shortage and for the selling rate of the US now being about 220 to 1? That's my first question. And sir, what mechanisms do you think government can put in place to ensure that Afro-Ghanaians are better equipped to take advantage of the oil sector in a bigger way? And thirdly, why doesn't the government use or opt to use the parliamentary activity system more to ensure there's a broader, greater consensus on legislation that will be acceptable regardless of changing government? And my fourth question.
Dennis, so one is mechanism for Afro-Ghanaians to participate more in oil and gas. There are parliamentary committees.
Yes.
Parliamentary committees. What are the other? What's the first one?
And the first one is when you believe that the exchange rate.
Oh, the exchange rate. Exchange rate. Yeah.
As a result of the Trinidadians buying.
Yes.
Using the market. And fourthly,
Right.
What will be done to deal with the residents at Plastic City? Does the government have a special program to deal with them who will be removed because?
Sure. So let me deal with the exchange rate first. There is a daily activity sheet from the central bank that looks at the demand for and the supply of currency. So I've had cause to look at the one for maybe Monday. And at that time, there was only one bank, one commercial bank, that showed higher requests than the availability of currency now. But when I look at the aggregate amount of foreign currency, some banks had significantly more than their requests. My point, Dennis, I've been at this before, in a foreign currency markets, you should have an interbank market for foreign currency. And that is how systems operate in equilibrium. But what we have now is that most of the banks, they keep their foreign currency for their customers. So you don't have an interbank market working. So if the interbank market was working, those who had surplus would sell to those who have demand. And then the market clears across the board, the aggregate market, the national market. But that doesn't happen. So people go there, and when they can't get it there, then they go to 4 other institutions. So then the demand gets replicated in 4 other places because they can't get it at time. So it had gone up, and then it came down back. I look at the average daily rate at which it's traded. So it's around that. It's hovering around the 216. It went up to 218, 220, came down back to 216. That sort of thing. But as I said before, keeping it there with this influx of foreign currency too is an important thing, the equilibrium, because if it appreciates too much, you know the problem we'll have. So we are watching it constantly. We're constantly watching this. We're watching the daily movement of balances and all of that. And if necessary, the government will intervene to smooth out the market. We've done that on several occasions before. But we can't also, we have to examine those who are requesting the foreign currency at some point in time to see if there are unusual spikes from some people based on what we've observed, this payment for goods for another country. That's the first one, and the foreign exchange. So what mechanism for the oil, so that Afro-Guyanese can benefit more? If you look at the oil and gas sector, if you go on the shore base and everything else, and look at the composition of the staff, because we track this, it's mainly Afro-Guyanese. Maybe there are 400 or 500 drivers that are needed. 3/4 are Afro-Guyanese. We've been tracking this because Region 4 mainly has a bulk of the oil and gas opportunities. So if you look at even the rig and stuff, the operations, so we don't believe Afro-Guyanese are excluded from the oil and gas sector. That's one. 2, we are training everybody, including, I was in Ling Avenue and I said, get the people up to train as truck drivers and carpenters and masons and everything else. So we have an aggressive training program through BIT that we could get more and more people equipped for this sector. And as I said before, through the Gold Scholarship Program. So that's the mechanism, but not, and then the local content law. So that is how we say it. We don't believe anybody is being excluded from the industry. Now, if you ask because Nigel, you were saying about a shore-based operation, right? No Afro-Guyanese own a shore base. Well, we have one shore base so far owned by a Guyanese, the big company here, big company that's been in business for a long time, in partnership with a foreign company. That's Gisby. That's the only one now operating in the Guyanese. And then you have another one being built. But that's a $400 million project. A $400 million. So I guess anybody could come up with a project of that nature. But it's not like shore bases are being built every day, everywhere. What would you say about Afro-Guyanese getting a commercial bank license? No, not commercial bank, a merchant bank license. I don't think we gave an Indo-Guyanese a merchant bank license. Should that be discrimination? We haven't given an Indo-Guyanese a merchant bank license. A Guyanese who is there and at one stage was supportive of APNU. So it is, everybody wants to divide us up ethnically, and it benefits only the people like Nigel Hughes and the others who have no care whatsoever. Nigel Hughes' wife was part of the ministry. Ask her how many Afro-Ghanaians benefited. She benefited from contracts herself, but not Afro-Ghanaians. What did they do? What did Nigel Hughes do in the 5 years? So yes, that's the second issue. Parliamentary management. I believe that the sectoral committees should operate more. They should function more and better. But these committees are chaired 2 by the government and 2 by the opposition. So they are, I think overall, the select committees you're talking, not the standing committees, not the sectoral standing committees. I think select committees can work, and in some cases they do work well. We have had in the past gridlock on certain bills when it goes to select committee, but our recent experience has been a fairly good one. So I believe that if it's positive, and maybe you're right, that the select committee, there is no opportunity for grandstanding. You know, when people go, although they do grandstand before it's sent to the select committee, so you don't avoid the grandstanding. But if you take away the camera from everybody, maybe you'll get some proper work done. But APNU often is not interested in that work. Like they could have submitted all their ideas long before when we were seeking consultation, when we open up for consultation, and make an issue of it. Do a press conference and say, look, we have 31 ideas here. We want 31 ideas, and we want to make sure we explain ourselves. This is what we're doing it for. They wait for the parliament the night before. So but maybe we should explore it. I don't have a problem with select committees, and particularly maybe complex legislation. This legislation on the petroleum activities bill was a straightforward piece of legislation. It's as clear as daylight, everything that's there. It's not complex. And then the final one is Plastic City. So I saw the issue coming up recently. I've not been able to follow it. It's just today I noticed that at the press conference, the leader of the opposition mentioned Plastic City. So let me tell you one thing, that we have to make some tough decisions regarding development. But wherever we have done this in a manner where we work with people. We work with people. That's the nature of the PPP. Plaisance, when they were trying to throw the people off, we have to do the 4-lane road, but we're going to work with the vendors there. We did it in Maka when we had to move people there. We're at the Wales area, that corridor, we're working with people there again. And so too in Plastic City. They will have a sympathetic ear in the government. So I guess we'd have to engage them if that has not been done. I've not been fully briefed. But we have to engage them and see that, first of all, safety and all of these issues are primary. Now, one thing not in relation to Plastic City, we have a number of people living on the seawall. I was on the East Coast, and they live on the seawall, a lot of Venezuelans, and the river defense there. We have to get people to come off. The children are living in a atrocious condition. And so we've been thinking about a way to get people accommodated in decent circumstances that are cost effective. You see a lot of children who, especially the Venezuelans who come back recently, they're squatting, and we can't have that in our country. We'd have to work with them. Yeah, sure. You want to get the microphone?
Yes, please.
Yeah,
I was really confining the question to the matter of access to resources to construct showcases. But I think Mr. Hughes is referring to a one-year-old report in which he said that there was systematic exclusion of Afro-Guyanese from the award of whole export licenses and a number of other areas which...
Okay, yeah. But I just gave you...
So broadly, if you have a mechanism in place in which these people will be, opportunities will be afforded to them eventually through some special scheme so that they
But Dennis, this is buying into the premise and the campaign of Nigel Hughes and the others to create this air of people being dispossessed. So I've just pointed out a number of areas. Take, for example, public service. Public service employment is mainly Afro-Guyanese. That's a $37 billion increase in public service employment costs since we got into office, leaving out the part-time job. $37 billion. I pointed out that the children of Guyana now are getting $8.4 billion. These are Afro-Guyanese children too. I pointed out about the pensioners. Now, let's look at the Army alone, $1.4 billion, well, their joint services, that they didn't have under APNU. Is this not, should we conclude that APNU discriminated against Afro-Guyanese when they took away the joint services bonus? Because it's mainly Afro-Guyanese. Now, let's talk about the gold licenses. The gold licenses, they developed historically. APNU was in office for 5 years. How did they rectify that? To get a gold license, you apply, and you get assessed. Trotman and the others gave a number of other things out. We saw the GHKL is running and hiding all the time from, look at the gold declarations that we're looking at now. There is an investigation going on from the period 2018. Why didn't they correct it? It's not that their PPP discriminated by taking away anybody licenses. They were there for 5 years. Why did they not give somebody a license? Because how many people applied? That is the question. How many people applied? So this is, if we keep repeating it without asking for data, why, if they believe that this is so, why not go to the ERC and say, this is what we discovered. X number of persons applied, and this is what the PPP did. The ERC is the mechanism that we jointly agree to pursue to investigate discrimination. But you know why they wouldn't go to the ERC? Because you have to go with facts. You can't go and make a general speech like that. All the water treatment plants, not a single Afro-Guyanese. And when you look at it, it's 2 bids you had from Afro-Guyanese. And the man that they're claiming that we discriminated against, they threw him out of GWI. And since we got back in office, he's getting work now, the black person. So when you go, they want to get to the granular level. Nigel Hughes likes to talk about these things, granularity and getting to disaggregated data. He wants constitutional reform for that. There's no need for constitutional reform for disaggregated data. We have that. It would be available. It would be available and they would demonstrate, but they ignore the data. They want to ignore the data whilst complaining about data and then point and claim discrimination. And they don't do, it's always about counting. So look how many people the farmers got help. But they would never at the same time saying that we are spending this year alone, apart from practically free electricity in Linden, we're spending over $300 million in fixing the grid. In fixing the grid in Linden for electricity price that is a fraction of national price. And that we are subsidizing electricity to the tune of $2–3 billion every year there. Never say that. You never hear that feature. How come that becomes What about the people who live in Georgetown, Afro-Guyanese and Indo-Guyanese and Amerindians? Is that discrimination to their Guyanese citizens? Why should one part get cheaper electricity? But we do it because historically that's how it happened. And so this is it. They don't want facts. They go there and stir up excitement. And when you look at the people who attend, it's like young people are not there. It's a fossil group from a long period back, and they stir this racism. I look at the picture of the Coffee 250, and they really don't, they just, it's racism in its extreme form. That's what they peddle.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo.
Yes.
Just a few questions from me, sir. Firstly, can you provide an update on the Lisa 2 project, specifically to say whether we have been able to pay off?
Which project?
Lisa 2. Can you say whether we've been able to pay off those costs? And back in March, sir, you said you were open to exploring the possibility of releasing the cost recovery statements and forecast of expenditure by Exxon. Can you say whether you have come to a conclusion of that? Secondly, Exxon quoted two different costs expended so far in the gas to energy project.
You're losing me because you're reading probably a Kaichor News article. So let's go to
it was
one.
actually from the court document.
Right. Yes. So yes. So the court. What is it that you want about the financial statements? Because I pointed out that Kaichor News couldn't read the financial statements. So what did I say? What further?
You said you were open to making those available, but on these.
But they're in the court document that you have. It's just that you couldn't read it. Not you, but Kaichor News. Whoever wrote that article couldn't read a financial statement. It's in the court document already.
On the Lisa 2 costs, can you say if we've managed to pay those off already? How far we are?
I don't know if we paid it off already.
All right, sir, on the...
I gave you a headline.
On the monitoring of expenses for the gas to energy project, sir, can you say if we're monitoring those costs and approving those prior to that being incurred?
We are monitoring all the costs on the gas to energy project for three aspects basically, which have to be done by the government, so we have a full understanding of the costs. So the preparation of the site, so first of all, Exxon, the preparation of the site, and then the award of the contract for the pipeline. Those were costs borne by Exxon. So far, we saw it in the documents that went out, and even in cases where they had to select the companies because of long lead time, we're aware of those. And the three other components, that is the NGL facility, the power plant, and the evacuation of the power. Those are financed from the government, and so we are fully aware of those costs.
Thank you, sir. Finally, for me, the opposition today called for government to justify extending the relinquishment provision for the Style block. They were calling for a document to show, for government to show how or why they are extending the period, based on how their operations were impacted. Can you say?
I don't get that. What did they call for?
They asked for a document that shows whether government did any due diligence on what ExxonMobil said it required the extension for, to verify if what you're saying is true,
Okay.
and the extent
Right.
to which it was impacted.
So, yes. So which extension? That is the extension.
For the exploration extension.
Okay. So there is one extension that we are contemplating now. It is to extend the life of the project by 10 years. There's a simple reason for that. Whether you do technical analysis or financial analysis, you have to, there is a necessity to move this project to supply the gas for over 20 years. The project cycle is a 20 years cycle. That is what it would be longer. Right now, when the project is completed, 2025 or so, it will, they would only have 12 years more on the permit. So that means 12 years more for laser to operate, to supply gas. We need that well to supply gas for 20 years at a minimum. So we have an interest in extending that, not just Exxon. So that's all that's happening now. I think they don't understand. That is the problem with Norton. He thinks we're extending the overall permit for the Stabroek block. We're not extending the Stabroek block permit. We're extending only the permit for the well that is producing that FPSO, that's producing the gas that's supplying the Wales project. Now, because we're not extending the Stabroek block, they have certain relinquishment provisions that will kick in. And so that is what will happen next year. Next year, they have to relinquish 20% of the entire Stabroek block as per our law. So I think APNU is confusing the two. They just, but they don't know what they're talking about. And they said that at the press conference today? Oh, God.
Some clarity on what they said. The relinquishment was supposed to happen this year, but it was extended.
Yeah, but that's the force. We look at the force majeure already. That's a different matter. We explain it in the period and why and all of that.
I was criticizing, but I was called the criticism that the government did not do any due diligence to see that if COVID affected them in the.
Don't worry with that. Yeah. Oh, I thought that they're just as another waste of time. I'm not wasting my time anymore. Yeah, with Norton.
Good afternoon, Dr. Jagdeo.
Yes.
From South News. I just have a follow-up question.
Yes.
Recently, the government concluded the BVI trade mission, and one of their
Which BVI?
BVI, yes, and one of the issues raised were the spike in terms of transportation costs, or shipping costs for the commodities, rice and sand. And the BVI Deputy Premier said definitively that she will be looking at that at a cabinet level. I want to know what your government has in place to address this issue.
Well, frankly speaking, we need all of our sand now. The export of sand now is a conflict. We can't stop the people who are supplying sand, but we have a huge demand for sand. It's pushed up the prices unreasonably. And we had to intervene by opening up a government sand pit, and we may have to do several more to just keep tempering the prices because of the pace of change and construction in the industry. So, and I think at the prices that people are getting here now, their prices are out-competing what they receive from abroad. So not many of them are that interested in now shipping unless they have a backhaul. They bring something back. It's very difficult to move things to the islands. And that's one of the biggest things. If you heard the lament of the heads of government of CARICOM, this is one of the biggest constraints to the development of a trade between the territories. The cost of transportation and the reliability of transportation. So I'm not sure. We would not be able to do anything in the short term. No use, I lied to you, to address that. Yeah.
Dr. Jagdeo, just a follow-up question to Demara's Dennis Chabral. I think you have not adequately answered Afro-Guyanese being afforded opportunities because of the fact that Travis Chase, with the Ministry of Gold License, Gold Export License, former or son-in-law of Gordon, Van Ness Charles would have had fuel license issued to him. So, how do, and your government has not gone off that?
I didn't want to do that. I am aware of it. Because if I do that, then I have to talk about the due diligence. And I don't want to vouch for the people or to say anything bad about anyone in the sector. Because that license, when you look, if you Google the name of the person in whose name the license was issued, you would see that there are 2 buckets of gold found under his bed and a whole heap of ammunition that APNU issued a license to. But you just Google the name and you will see. But I didn't want to come here for that today. But that is what happened. That's the kind of due diligence that I think GHK Lal did. And he actually defended it, by the way. GHK Lal defended that and chastised the media for saying, when the media exposed it, he chastised them for saying they didn't come to him first and get his position on it. But you go back and read the newspaper articles, and you will find out exactly that how this happened. Mr. Clean, Mr. Conscience of Guyana, he gave those licenses out when he was there. So I didn't want to get to that. Anything else? Yes.
Dr. Jagdeo, just to follow up on the question of local content, we recently saw a JV signed between a Ghanaian and Guyanese Canadian company regarding offshore monitoring. During the revision of the local content law, is this something that the government envisions bringing into the first schedule so that Guyanese can be able to be part of that offshore monitoring capability?
Yeah.
And secondly, I know there's a lot of talk about energy security, but the fact remains that many of our Caribbean brothers and sisters are heavily indebted and they don't have the infrastructure for energy. Do you think the region will find itself in a place where some countries are able to attain energy security while others will be left behind?
We have, in CARICOM, there are huge challenges. So it's not just, given the potential devastation that weather-related events could wreak on economies in the region, and given the fiscal state of those countries, their budgets, and thirdly, the debt overhang that they currently have and the large amount of revenue that it takes to service debt. So they have 3 situations. 1, devastation by weather-related events, fiscally stressed budgets, and massive debt overhang. That's using up a significant part of their revenue. Their ability to craft sustainable medium-term strategies is limited. Their ability is limited. And so they will face, and then they have a 4th factor where most of them import their food and their energy requirements. So food security and energy security will be big issues for them in the future. But it's also the ability to keep the countries going. That right now they're struggling in many parts of the region to keep the countries going. So it's not a good picture to be place to be. When we were there at one time, so we know painfully how difficult it was when we were exactly the same thing. Our fiscal deficit was 25% of GDP. Every 4 years, we were doubling the debt because you had to finance it. So 4 years, you're doubling the debt in relation to GDP. Our BOP deficit was 47% of GDP. Every 2 years, we're doubling the debt, the country's debt with the rest of the world. And then we're using nearly 100% of revenue to service debt. That schedule was more, but actual was nearly 100%. And it took us a while to work our way out of that and holding a steady rein. So I don't know, and we have at least some greater potential, like we have an agriculture, more diversified economy. We have rice, sugar, timber in the early days, and gold and stuff. A lot of those countries have just tourism and maybe one or other sector. So it's not a good place to be in. So I'm sorry I'm so bleak, but this is it. Now renewables, they may have to look at renewable because one thing, there's sunshine in the Caribbean Sea. So whilst the energy security, they would have to invest a lot in like solar and stuff like that. Solar. The batteries and stuff are still expensive, but at least if they put in grid tie-in system, they can cut their energy needs, because if you can supply the grid with solar in the day and then in the evening just burn the fuel, then you'd still be able to offset some of the costs, reduce your energy import bill, which was high. At one stage, it was 25 to 30% of GDP, energy import bill to the Caribbean. Guess how much it's in the US? 5% of GDP. And in the Caribbean, it was 25 to 30% of GDP. That's how much of the money they had to use to import fuel. So it is something that's tough. All right, thank you very much. Oh.
I have the second question that I asked.
All right. Oh, what is
local content.
the...
Capturing the offshore monitoring service.
Yes. We are hoping that, let's see if we try to do it formally, because I don't want to say that a company has, we're glad that the company created a joint venture, but we have to go to tender. So we still have to look at that, but I'm glad that a Guyanese group is involved, or Guyanese individuals. I want to see how much really, though, the Guyanese content is in that, but conceivably. All right, I'm giving Kaichor news since Glenn Lal didn't come. You could ask the Glenn Lal question.
Okay. Well, I'm asking now, finally team went to the Chinese landing, and they had a deadline to come up with a response to the US by August 10. Can you provide an update to what's the situation there?
Okay, so I'm aware that the fact-finding team went in. I think one newspaper, I asked Pauline why the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs rep wasn't on the team, and she said they were on the team, but the one newspaper said that they were not there. So I hope that that gets corrected. I told her she should have corrected it, but they went there. As you know, all the mining activities are shut down now. So that means there was a claim that you had a number of miners descended on the community, and the miners were creating social problems, and that there was a lot of environmental problems. So what has happened is, we went straight to the source of all the problems, which is mining. and we shut down. There was a cease order to stop all mining. So that means if there was pollution, you stop the pollution, and if miners were there and operating, they can't mine there anymore. Nobody could mine. So we fixed the problem at the source. Now, we have to verify that there was actual pollution. So the EPA was there, they took a number of samples, we asked the community, we were taking statements. A number of people from the community did not want to, because we have to verify. The fact-finding mission came to say, basically went to see if the allegations made were factual and then how we are going to address them. A lot of people did not want to respond to that issue. They said there's only one issue, shutting down the VARRA claim. But that's not what went before the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. What went there is that there are a large number of miners have gone in, there's big pollution, etc. So now that's being assessed. The EPA checking the pollution levels, mercury level, everything. And I guess the response should be made shortly. That was my latest update. That's the latest update at this time. Huh? Well, if I can't say that now, but at least now it's done. Let's see, there is no mining, no pollution, no harassing of anybody, because that was the complaint. And I saw the big controversy between Ralph and Starbuck News on this matter about the thing. I think they have some merits too, you know. You should look at it, the debate.
The issue that arises there, Chinese land, the people said that they were not being prevented to work. They said that they know the government has been providing some part-time jobs and some cash grants, but they have to live beyond that. And they say their livelihood is going to spin a little batter inside the mines, pork knocking.
But that's not what went before the UN body.
But
yes, but that, you know what went there. We have to respond to that. That there's pollution in the area and it's overrun by mining. They didn't say, so we got to now, a number of other things, people are being harassed and stuff. We have to address those issues. So, well, I don't know how you're going to, we are aware of those concerns too. But frankly speaking, there are a number of people in the village. I don't want to speak too much, but the same question that was raised with me earlier. Some people want the mining and some don't want the mining. Some believe, a few believe that VARRA should continue. The majority believe he shouldn't continue, the majority. And so it's a complex situation. One thing is sure, that we are on the side of the village. We have always been. From the time we went to court, we're on the side of the village and we want to protect people, the villagers and their interests. Okay? Right.
Third question, there was a 5 minute US.
Third question, man. This is the 13th question now.
There was a 5 million US that was sold to the government. The shares that was sold to the Hong Kong company. It was a big thing back 27, 28. We have not heard anything about it since. Has the government been paid this amount or is it still?
All right. I have to verify that, but most likely it has been paid, but I'll verify it because, yes. Okay, thank you. Oh yes, I didn't set it up.